but things are starting to bubble up and bubble out. Just give me something about free agency that you heard that maybe changes your opinion of what a team may or may not do.
Well, listen, I think we have to – free agency is a broad term because how much free agency is truly going to occur when the amount of cap space out there is not all that heavy? Now, listen, you got a couple teams that have some meaningful amounts of cap space that are contenders: Oklahoma City, Philadelphia, Orlando. Those are three off the top of my head. But we're not – what's interesting, listen, there's a couple really interesting names that are be bandied about right now. Paul George is one of them because if he opts into his the $48 million in his deal, that's going to be much easier for him to go to a team he wants to go to with the Clippers' willingness to trade him. And for the Clippers, they're going to want to get something back for him if they're going to lose him. And I don't think they're going to come to an agreement in a deal. I feel like what Paul George wants, and I don't think it's about annual money. I think it's about years. The amount of years that Paul George wants is going to be 4 years, and I don't think the Clippers want to be paying him at 38 at this point. They're going to have to make they're in the process of negotiating with James Harden right now. I think, again, it's going to be the issue is going to be years than money with him as well. So I think that's one name that's definitely in play. And then the other one's the guy that's under contract that his team just is going to refuse to extend because of his age, mileage, and frequency of injury, and that's Jimmy Butler. And the buzz is getting heavy that Jimmy Butler is going to be moved by the Heat, even if it means they take a step or two back in the short term to try to see if they can rebuild a title contender. But I think they've kind of looked at their window and realized the window around Butler is closed. Plus, Butler's done there now what he's done at many other locations, which is you have him for a little while, but he wears on you in a big way, and I think the Heat are kind of tired of all that. So the whole free, and don't get me wrong, there's going to be guys that are free agents that are going to sign. It's the way it works. But the major names, I think, that are going to switch teams are going to be involved in trades because the big theme that you're going to hear, and you will continue to hear it from now till this offseason wraps up, is the second apron. All the second apron restrictions kick in right now, and so much of what teams do is going to revolve around staying out of that or getting out of that second apron so they're able to at least operate with some roster flexibility, because the handcuffs that the second apron put on your roster flexibility can be very, very punishing to teams that want to improve.
Oh, and Brian, that seems to be one of the priorities for the Golden State Warriors. And the big news in the Bay Area over the weekend is that it doesn't sound like Klay Thompson is a huge priority with no contract on the table, frozen talks, all the rest. But one thing that was also reported is they are trying to search for a path to a larger scale upgrade. You just mentioned the two names that we've been kind of tossing around, Paul George and Jimmy Butler. When you hear the Warriors trying to seek a large scale upgrade, are those the two names that come to the top of mind? And how are they feasibly able to do that?
Well, okay, so those are the two names that I've heard that the Warriors have kicked the tires on. But again, there's going to be availability of other guys that hasn't necessarily been revealed yet. The one name that I have heard consistently that kind of bubbling under the surface, and I'm starting to hear it a little more as we dive into this week, is Kevin Durant. That's another one that may very well be available. Phoenix, if they're going to trade somebody to create flexibility, they're going to have to trade one of their star players, really. That's going to be what it ends up being for them, because they, again, are under the second apron restrictions of not being able to aggregate two players in a deal. So that's another name to keep in mind. But when it comes to the Warriors between now, so today's the 24th, between now and Friday, have an interesting salary asset with Chris Paul. So Chris Paul, by Friday, it's either a $5 million buyout or $30 million is going to be guaranteed for his contract next year. If they can find a team that's got the guy to move them to, and Paul's money gets guaranteed, the Warriors can then take that young asset with not a big salary and some picks and turn that into a large-scale guy. Because keep one thing in mind about the Warriors' salary situation right now. Klay Thompson's $43 million coming off the books takes them out, not out of the luxury tax, but it takes them back below the first apron, which means that they get all of the, except for the full mid-level exception, they'd have a taxpayer's lower mid-level exception. They would be able to operate that way as the calendar turns on July 1st to the next NBA fiscal year. So then the Warriors from there, can make that kind of deal and end up back in the second apron, but at least there's some flexibility. Here's the other thing you got to remember about what the Warriors are looking at here. The Warriors want to be able to sign Jonathan Kuminga to a contract extension. I know we've heard his name in trade talks a lot. I would be floored if they trade him. Floored. Because I just think he's got a lot of promise. And for them, it almost feels like, let's fill the Klay spot with Kuminga and we'll play a little different, be a little bit bigger. Klay's a little bit older. So there's that whole thing looming too. The Warriors doing a little bit of a reload here to try to make one more push in this Steph Draymond era kind of seems like the right thing. And unfortunately, from a financial standpoint, the sacrificial lamb has to be Klay Thompson, just because that money coming off the books allows them the flexibility that they wouldn't have. Even if they go make Klay a deal, that $20 million is going to keep him in the second apron. Even if and who knows if he's going to take $20 million. So I think this is imminent that the Warriors and Klay Thompson say goodbye. And do I know that the Warriors had a big player? I'm not sure that they do. But this Chris Paul, this option on Chris Paul's contract and the ability to guarantee it is a really nice salary cap slot to be able to move out, stack a deal, and be able to get a more significant player.
Brian Geltzeiler joining us on 95.7 The Game. He's a host on Sirius XM NBA Radio, also a contributor at NBA TV. Assuming the big boys' names out there, kind of Butler and Paul George, is there any scenario that you see where the Warriors could land one of those guys, acquire one of those guys, and still end up with Jonathan Kuminga on their own team?
Yeah, it's possible. Listen, if they end up having to do something, Chris Paul is going to be the lead salary piece. There's probably going to be some picks involved. Listen, I think they want to keep Kuminga. I think ultimately they would rather keep Kuminga than land a 34-year-old player. And I agree with it. I would feel the same way. And they feel like they can do both, and they would like to do both, and they're operating under two timelines. But I think we also have an understanding of that Kuminga is a keeper, Podziemski is likely a keeper. A player like Jackson Davis they would like to keep, but if he had a lot of value in a deal for them, I think they start to look at things a little bit differently. So that's a guy that could move, and Moody could move. Listen, they got to make the same kind of financial decision on Moody. Yeah. They do for Kuminga, and I don't think they're as sweet on Moody as they are Kuminga. And I don't know if they want to pay him a number. Maybe let somebody else be the ones that have to pay him that number. So I think they could piece something together. It's just the question becomes the problem they would have is that the assets they'd be moving out for a player like George would be assets that were more revolving around future assets, younger guys, picks, things like that. I think if the Clippers make a deal with the age trajectory of their team, with the age of Leonard, with the age of Harden, they're going to want guys that can help now. And the one team I keep looking at and I keep hearing about, but I think makes a lot of sense with Paul George, is the New York Knicks, because the Knicks have to do something now. When they re-sign, and Knicks don't care about being in the luxury tax and paying that tax money. That's not an issue for Jim Dolan and the people of Madison Square Garden. I think the issue more with the Knicks is once they re-sign Anunoby, once they re-sign Hartenstein, they're going to be in the second apron. So if they're going to use Bogdanovic's expiring deal, or the fact that Randall's only got 2 years left on his deal, and all those picks they've accumulated, they kind of have to use them now. Because otherwise, or just keep this team together as is. So this is kind of a put up or shut up summer for the Knicks, and it just so happens that George may be the guy available for them. And when it comes to now assets and picks, the Knicks could pretty much outbid everybody out there.
Well, it seems like the biggest now asset for the Warriors as a player is Kuminga. That's the guy that everyone is kind of looking at. You mentioned you wouldn't move him, and that a payment might be imminent as far as a contract extension for him. I'm curious how you read the Scotty Barnes rookie max earlier today, 5 years, up to $270 million. What do you think that does for Jonathan Kuminga's market when the Warriors are trying to evaluate how much they want to give him if they do extend him this summer?
Not as much as I think Jonathan Kuminga would like it to. Because the Raptors are in a unique situation in the respect that they're in the midst of a full-blown rebuild, and Scotty Barnes is a centerpiece. And the Raptors knew when they were going to trade Pascal Siakam, when they traded OG Anunoby, two guys that both had expiring deals, they knew that they were not planning, they didn't want to pay either of them, so they were sending them both out. They also knew they were paying Barnes. So they got to get to 90% of the cap. Why not pay Barnes that kind of money when they've invested in him, what they've invested in him, in terms of just saying, hey, he is, the face of the franchise type of thing. So I think that's kind of an isolated incident. And Jonathan Kuminga could compare his numbers to Scotty Barnes till the cows come home. The Warriors aren't going to pay that kind of number for him. And in the end, with guys going into second contracts, you got to remember how much control the team has. All right. Now, yes, could Jonathan Kuminga sign a qualifying offer and then be an unrestricted free agent the following year? He absolutely can. But no one's ever done that. They all take the financial security. So in the end, Kuminga will negotiate to a certain extent, but he's not going to sniff that Scotty Barnes money. He's just not. And that's okay. He'll get a really good contract, and maybe it's 4 years at $120 million, and he's be pretty pleased if that's what they offer him. But I kind of think that's where it's going to end up with Kuminga. But this is also when you're on a team, when you have a championship ring and you're on a successful team with a successful program with one of the 15 best players ever to play the sport, and that happens to be the best shooter in the history of the sport. When you're in that kind of situation, you're not going to get Scotty Barnes money in Toronto when Toronto's in a full-blown rebuild. So I think when push comes to shove, if it's something Kuminga's representatives try to compare, it becomes to the Warriors very much an apples to oranges comparison. They're not going to look at Barnes' contract and let that be any kind of starting point for what they're going to look to pay Kuminga.
Brian Geltzeiler joining us on 95.7 The Game. He's a host on Sirius XM NBA Radio, contributor at NBA TV. He's been great over the years in terms of Warriors and NBA. Let me throw this one at you. There's a player who just got traded who always comes up when his name came up. The Warriors always came up, and it's Alex Caruso. Good on-ball defender, somebody like that. He got traded for Josh Giddey, young player from Oklahoma City. If you look at the Warriors roster right now, do you look and say, boy, if they really wanted Caruso, they could have gotten him? Or is Giddey somebody who is looked at as a far better asset than what the Warriors have?
No, in my opinion, he's not. Listen, I think what the Bulls front office did in this deal, Matt, is pretty much management malpractice. Because I don't know. First, they turned down 2 first-round picks in the offseason for Alex Caruso. Or I'm sorry, at the trade deadline for Alex Caruso. I don't understand how you deal with Sam Presti in Oklahoma City with the understanding that he has all of these first-round draft picks, and there is no financial wherewithal to use them all. You can't have all these guaranteed contracts. At one point, he's going to have to start to move them for players that he wants. Right. How do you not get one pick out of the deal? Because here's what happened with Giddey. One thing we learned about Josh Giddey in the postseason, right now, at least at this moment, he is not good enough defensively to be on the court in the postseason. Every time he got on the court, Dallas used him and abused him. They went at him to a point where he was literally unplayable. I get that the Bulls are going into a rebuild, but you need picks. Bring the player over with a pick or two, even if it's a protected pick. Bring the player over with a pick or two. But the Bulls got sweet on Giddey. They felt like they were getting him at a bargain. And listen, and the bottom line is this. The Thunder were selling low on what Giddey's value should have been, but somehow the Bulls bought high. And it's tough to understand. The biggest problem the Bulls have right now, just as a quick aside, guys, is that the guys that made the mess are the guys that are trying to clean the mess right now. And I think it's probably time for a management change there. And I like Arturas Karnisovas. I think he's a smart guy. I like Mark Eversley. But these guys put the pedal to the metal far too fast on trying to create a contender. They have fallen short here, and now you have a big asset drain team bereft of assets, and they're trading a guy away like Caruso here who, listen, he's coming up, I believe, into the final year of his deal. All right, so they weren't planning on paying him anyway, so they wanted to get something for him. But, geez, there's got to be a little bit more foresight and planning. I mean, you kept him at the trade deadline when you could have gotten 2-1s, and for what? A play-in loss? That's what you kept him for. And now you take a bath on him with a player who may end up being fine, but his value's at an absolute low. Listen, I think the Warriors could have outbid them if they wanted to, but I don't know that the Bulls were listening to bidding on him. I think Giddey was a player they decided they were sweet on, and they grabbed him when they could get him.
Ryan, one more Warriors-related question for you. A big reason why they don't have a ton of money for Klay Thompson, number one, because of the new CBA, but number two, because of contracts that they've handed out each of the last 2 summers. I kind of want to just throw this at you. Jordan Poole, 130 over 4 years. Andrew Wiggins, $110 million over 4 years. Last offseason, Draymond Green, $100 million over 4 years. If the Warriors could take one of those contracts back, which one do you think it'd be?
Absolutely Andrew Wiggins. And listen, the Poole contract was significantly worse, but to their credit, they found a way out of it and found some financial flexibility with bringing Chris Paul in. So they were able to spin that into something that was actually helpful. So in the end, that was the worst contract that they signed, but it's the Wiggins one. And I can't totally blame them on the Wiggins one. I thought it was a good value contract when they signed it, because you got to remember, when they re-signed Andrew Wiggins for that extension, they had just come off winning an NBA championship, and Wiggins was their second most important player behind Steph Curry. He was fantastic in those playoffs and unbelievable in that Boston series. We just watched Tatum and Brown use and abuse Luka and Kyrie Irving. Tatum and Brown couldn't handle Andrew Wiggins, and he shut both of them down at different points in time in that series. So, listen, Wiggins is the one they would want out of. And quite frankly, guys, here's the other reason. The number one reason that they have to say goodbye to Klay Thompson to create the financial flexibility that they need to improve this team is because Andrew Wiggins' contract, unless they're going to attach assets to it, is untradeable. If they could get off the Wiggins deal, they'd figure something out with Klay. They are not confident they can get off the Wiggins deal. I'm not to say that they don't at one point, but I just don't think it's something that they believe they can do, and they don't want to leave themselves with, we actually need to trade Andrew Wiggins to improve this roster. I think that's a losing battle from the jump, and it's something that I think this front office is too smart to engage in, so they can't be sentimental. Klay's been amazing. He's been great. He's been a legendary Warrior. Unfortunately, he's going to end up finishing his career elsewhere.
Brian, thank you so much as always, man. It's starting to pick up, and next week it's probably going to go nuts. It'll go a little nuts this week, guys. Yeah.
A lot going to happen. I mean, keep in mind, Wednesday, first round of the draft. Yep. Sunday, free agency starts. We're going to see a heck of a lot of stuff this week, probably starting sometime tonight. So it's going to get fun. I'm here if you guys need me. Always a pleasure to join you both.
Appreciate it, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Yes, sir. Brian Geltzeiler, host on Sirius XM NBA Radio, contributor at NBA TV.